Hello listeners, Jordan here. I just want to let you know that you can listen to Nighttime early and ad-free on Amazon Music. Include it with Prime.
You are tuned to the Nighttime Podcast, focused on the fringe of Canada.
Hello listeners, and welcome back to my coverage of Carp, Ontario's Guardian UFO Case. In the last episode, my guest Ian Rogers spoke both about his experiences investigating the Guardian case, but also about the route this story took to being featured on a major CBC documentary named UFO Town. When I was putting that prior episode together, I came to learn that my friend and past guest of the show, Chris Rutkowski, was one of the UFO investigators who received Guardian's mailings back in the 80s and early 90s. I also learned that Chris was invited, but declined to participate in the UFO Town documentary. Given all that, I thought Chris would be the perfect person to invite here to help me both further break down the case and discuss the UFO Town documentary. And that's what we're about to get into. The following discussion was recorded shortly after UFO Town aired on CBC. So let's get into it. In this episode, Chris Rutkowski and I will discuss CBC's UFO Town documentary and the strange world of the Guardian UFO case. Chris Rutkowski, what's with the strange background? It looks like you're in front of an auditorium or something? Are you giving a lecture?
This is my lecture mode here, but I'm going to change it. I'm just finding the one I want to use here.
You're giving a lecture on Guardian UFO truth because you're a real champion of this case. How's it going over there? Aside from your technical background issues.
Yeah, it's we're hanging in there. We're not fully locked down again, which is good, I think.
Let's get into it here. So you've been associated with this case, or at least involved in this case since the very beginning. You are one of the chosen few who received mysterious packages from Guardian. Indeed, yeah. Back in the late 1980s, of all things, that's when the story really began. Yeah. And did you, because in Guardian, it seemed like there was kind of two sets of packages that were sent out. There was the initial ones in like 88, 89-ish. And then
89, yeah. And then in 91, 92, something like that, the second set came out.
Did you receive both sets?
Yes. Yeah.
So you're a purebred Guardian.
You bet.
Recipient. So in 88, like to paint a picture, when you're investigating UFOs and being involved in the stuff you're involved in now, back in 88, of course you weren't on, in Facebook groups and stuff. Was it unusual for you to receive like a package in the mail with photos of, dating to be aliens? Like, was that an unusual thing to get back then?
No. No. Yeah, I had been receiving things in the mail for quite some time. Back then, I had already been publishing my Swampcast journal for a while. And one of the deals that ufologists used to do before the age of the internet was publish UFO zines. And they would trade with each other. So you would just get people's mailing addresses who published something, and you ship them off to them, hoping to get something in return. And so you're on mailing lists all over the place. So I ended up exchanging paper copies of stuff mailed from literally all around the world. Jenny Randall's, the British ufologist, I was getting her Northern UFO News in exchange for the Swampcast Journal. I was getting MUFON Skylook. I was getting stuff from Italy, South America, like literally all over the place. So getting a package in the mail of stuff was actually fairly common. And until the videotape showed up, that was a little bit strange. But until the videotape showed up, it was just, photos of blurry photos of aliens or rants that went on about, the Great White Brotherhood and government cover-up and all that sort of stuff. So it was very interesting that this sort of came, and the trouble was that usually these things are sort of generic. And what was interesting about the first batch of Guardian stuff in '89 was that it was very specific. It talked about a crash of a UFO in a specific place, and that was a little bit different.
Mm-hmm.
And you'd think that this would be verifiable. And so in 1989 there was a UFO researcher named Clive Naden from England, and he at that time was living in Ottawa. Well, no, not Ottawa. He was in Nepean, actually, just outside of Ottawa. And he had been a ufologist in England, and he had moved to Canada for a while and was doing some investigations in the Ottawa area. And so when this started up, he and I had been corresponding, and he said he'll go and take a look. So he went and tromped around in the bush and talked with everybody he could find in the area, and in short order found that there was nothing to the story whatsoever. So we thought that was the end of it, really. And then a few years later, when the next round started coming, things changed. And in between that time, Graham Lightfoot, who was with, I'm trying to remember the Q4, I think, had actually gone out, and he didn't go until the spring because the middle of winter, when Clive went, it was just really rough going, and waist high snow drifts and all that sort of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So Graham went out and he did the exact same thing, talked to people, tromped around in the area, found there was nothing to it. But then the video came out, and suddenly it seemed that people took a more of an interest. When it was just a story and a piece of paper, that was one thing. But it took on a life of its own because of the videotape and the fact that it was sent a little more broadly.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, a lot of people in the States got it, and a lot of people who didn't know the area latched onto it and thought it was something. In the documentary, Bob Exler was promoting it as a real case. Bill Nell actually also was promoting it as a major case. Bill, better known for some UFO films produced over the past 2 years, but his version of Carp really went off on all sorts of tangents. We couldn't figure out where that came from. And the Toronto MUFON gang, led by Tom Theophanous, did an expose of the whole Carp thing and published it. And they were threatened to be sued for all sorts of things for killing a good story, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
But people were really mad at them. But it had a life of its own, and I think the documentary really shows this, that people really wanted to believe so much, and as Ian says, people believe what they want to believe, and the story had all these elements that were so fun. Military cover-up. There's of course, so close to Ottawa, there's this great military base. Of course, there's going to be helicopters. Of course, there's going to be, lots of maneuvers and stuff. And the interesting thing is that where this video was shot, they're actually doing sort of war games and stuff like that. I mean, there is signs about, handwritten DND property keep out, and shot through with bullet holes and things like that. So, it was such an obvious fabrication, but it really was something that people glommed onto, and that's it. The story took on a life of its own, and I think the documentary really goes there.
Yeah, I think this case encompasses a lot of like the best parts of UFO cases and the worst parts of UFO cases.
Absolutely. And I actually refused to do the show.
Yeah, I want to hear about that. So you were one of the people that the production crew reached out to be involved in it. Why did you say no?
Well, because My view was that if you're going to do a TV documentary about a good UFO case, and they talked about this being a good case, and I said, no, it's not a good case, and I laid out why. Why not do, some of the other things that have a little more going for them, like Shag Harbor has a handful of documents and RCMP officers. People probably know me about talking about Falcon Lake. There's Falcon Lake, Rivers, Manitoba, Langenberg, Yukon. There's a lot of cases that have a lot of supporting evidence and multiple witnesses and investigations by officials. So do a really good case. And the problem was that Carp had resurfaced over the years several times, and on Facebook, for example, and other social media, people are always posting, here's a really great case. Look at this video. It proves that UFOs are real. And I said, no, it's not real. It was exposed. Oh, how do you know? And, you're just saying that. You don't know. And then they said, well, I know somebody who lives in the Carleton area, and they say it's absolutely bona fide. And, we've had that over the years. It's done. It's a hoax. Move on to something more interesting. Mm-hmm. And despite the fact that after seeing the documentary, yes, it's good television. I mean, it's a good story. And like you say, it does show the good and the bad of ufology, because there were some really good ufologists who really took on this case as an investigation, and they wanted to get to the bottom of it. Certainly Ian Rogers, Drew, I think, investigated as well. And it shows that ufologists are not all grouped into the same basket of dummies like the skeptics and debunkers want to say. But there are some who are clearly out with their own agendas, and I think that's one of the problems that we encountered with this particular case. So I turned down. I said, I really don't want to have anything to do with the show. If you're going to do the Carp case, I'll talk about some other cases. And I had just had the experience of working with basically the same crew on Spaceman, the case about Ranger Taylor, and I had reservations about that case too, because it didn't speak to ufology. It's an interesting human interest story, but didn't speak to ufology. But they did a good job on that. So they actually have a pretty good record right now. Yeah. And I can tell you that they're actually working on more stories right now. Good. That are under development. So I think that they did a good version of the Carp case. It's a hoax, people. Get over it.
Yeah, and they didn't shy away from that, though. Like, I think what I liked about the film was they told the story, the fascinating aspects and tabloidy aspects of the story, but they kept it more about just the charade about this Guardian character and the search for Guardian, highlighting the people who did some investigation into it, like Ian, and highlighting the people who seem to be pretty devout believers. Like, they had a couple people, I don't recall the names, but there's two witnesses that recalled it like landing in their backyard when they were children and such. So I just thought it encompassed, again, the good and the bad of the ufology world. It had the great story, the shadowy Guardian figure with a VHS tape mailing it to you and everybody else. It had the self-promoting Bob Exler, who, like it or not, you see a lot of kind of characters like that in ufology.
It's a slice of ufology. There's no question that it does portray ufology with all its warts.
If only the case had more credibility, then it would have everything. Because it's that's the one thing the case lacks is credibility. There's not really anything to it. And another thing I'm curious about this is when Guardian's sending out these packages, of course the tape was there, and the tape is what everybody talks about, but they also had this basically white nationalist manifesto. Back then, did everybody just ignore that and be like, this is a great tape?
It was ignored. And what's interesting is that a lot of the conspiracy buffs were into that. A lot of the UFO types were into the White Brotherhood, the Great White Brotherhood. And of course, that was part of a lot of the early contactee stuff as well. connections to a higher race, secret mystical organizations and that type of thing. So there was all that sort of stuff that was woven into a lot of early ufology in the 50s, especially. So this was not at all surprising. But yeah, a lot of red flags. And what's interesting is that a lot of that is prominent today. If you look into the UFO conspiracy stuff that's been going on in the radical right, there's a lot of white brotherhood, pseudo-Nazi sort of stuff connected with the UFO organizations. I mean, the Samizdat, there's some great books, not great books, but some books that were published on UFOs as Nazi secret weapons. I mean, those are published in the 50s and 60s and are still under some private circulation. So they've been part of the ufology movement for quite some time.
Yeah, well, even maybe this was 2 years ago. You know Chris Cogswell? Do you know who I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah, so he's a friend of mine, and he became the lead of investigations for MUFON and ended up resigning his position because of some what would be considered, I guess, far right behavior of MUFON higher ups. That was just a year or two ago, and
yeah, absolutely, yeah, that's still out there, absolutely.
Yeah, so I guess that isn't as much of a departure from what you would expect. But I just found like everything I read about Carp or the Guardian case, or if you watch the Unsolved Mysteries case episode, it really focuses on the short video of a truck, as you would put it, with flares and such.
Well, and the original one of the prevailing explanations for a long time was helicopters, and what they had done, of course, is even though this is stabilized, they were moving the camera up and down so that it looked like the object itself was moving up and down and landing and so forth. And of course, at the same time, there were these black unmarked helicopters that people had said were flying around there. Exler was really big on that. And of course, I mean, I spent a lot of time in Ottawa. And as a matter of fact, I have a friend who's from Nepean and Canada, and we've driven all the way through there. And sure, there's a military presence in the area. It's Canada's capital, so to have helicopters flying in and out, no surprise, absolutely none.
Yeah, it doesn't strike me as odd, but were you involved back then when there was like a search for who this Guardian was? Were you involved in any of that, trying to identify?
Well, yeah, not being in the Ottawa area for any length of time back then. No, I wasn't involved in the real search. Tom Theophanous was very involved in trying to find out who it was. As a matter of fact, I was just going through my file, and I have a 3-page statement from Tom Theophanous from back then, basically, laying out what he thought was really going on and didn't mince words. I also have Clive Naden's statement. He actually solicited help from a lot of people trying to track down who Guardian was, and this was actually quite prominent. We know Facebook right now.
I've heard of it. Yeah.
Before that, there was a number of forums, Paracast and all that. Well, there was Paranet and FidoNet, and I actually have printouts of where is it now? Printouts of where this is UFO Echo. So this is before Paranet even. On 12th of September 1991. We looked into the supposed Carp crash 2 years ago. So this was talking about the first batch. Caused a bit of a flurry, and Larry Fenwick actually gave a talk on the case at Wendell Stevens' UFO conference in 1991. But our associates in Ottawa actually went to Carp to try and check out the report and found there was virtually nothing to it. Clive Naden, a very competent investigator who contributes to my annual UFO survey, trumped around in the bush exactly where the crash was said to have occurred, and also spoke to people living in the area. Turns out there had been some UFOs seen in the area in months gone by, but nothing that would in any way verify the story. That's a continuance of the search of the silly hoax. I wonder why people on Paranet are wasting so much time on it. That was 1991.
It's amazing that it's been going on that long. And when people were interested in this case back then, was it, were they looking for Guardian because they thought maybe Guardian had some connection to important people and there was some credibility there? Or was it just kind of like, let's find out who this person is that's putting this hoax together?
Well, there's a number of factors. One is crash retrieval, and mentioned Wendell Stevens, of course. Well, crash retrieval was really prominent back late 89, 91. Just really starting to ramp up. Is there evidence of a crash? I mean, this was, this is about the same time that Roswell was starting to become a little better known. And it was the fact that if there was something that was in Canada, I mean, that would make it really interesting. And then it had all these elements about, would the government actually cover up a case like this? And just, the government hushing everybody up, bulldozing everything flat so you wouldn't be able to get any evidence of your own, mailed in secrecy. And it actually, the fact that so many UFO investigators were receiving it was actually a bit of an ego boost for a lot of them. Mm-hmm. That, hey, I'm important enough that I got this secret package, that type of thing. So there had a lot of elements that contributed to the UFO myth.
Yeah, that's such a more exciting time, because now if you have, this story that you hear, I find most often is like, I was at the beach and I took a picture, and then when I got home and I looked at the picture, I saw this in the sky above me, and there's a little black dot or something like that. Mm-hmm. You could just dump that on Facebook and it's so forgettable. But back in in this era, late 80s, early 90s, you couldn't do that. So you had to take the effort to print it. And if maybe you had access to those early versions of the internet you talked about, but if not, you had to get it printed and send it to people. So it almost added this sort of gatekeeper at the beginning of the sighting or whatever it is becoming known. So
absolutely. And one other added element, which wasn't in the documentary, is that this was actually reported to the National Research Council.
Oh.
And actually Clive had that. Where is it now? It was phoned to the National Research Council on April 5th, 1989. And this actually was, not the story itself. This was an early version. But a woman said she was driving between Carp and Ottawa with her son. It was an orange-yellow light that was pulsating, no sound. It veered and then stopped in midair like a helicopter. It was 30 feet in diameter. She had to veer on the highway to avoid it. She stopped the car and they both got out. Her son was wearing a ski jacket. When he got home, the arm was burned. She took him to the hospital and the doctor noticed that her lip was swollen, and according to what the doctor was supposed to say, he said it was like they were exposed to radiation. Now, this was reported to the National Research Council, so that added a level of authority to the case as well. And the reasoning was, well, if somebody was making a hoax, would you actually report it to authorities? And I don't know, maybe somebody felt safe reporting it to the NRC, because what are they going to do? Report you to the MPs? I don't know. But it had this whole range of stuff. And the fact that it was all combined in one story made people think, well, maybe there might be something behind this.
Yeah, it's got a lot of the different agencies, because it's of course, Exler has a background with NASA in some capacity. Then there is the police eventually get involved. The RCMP get involved in some weird way. So it was almost like whoever was putting this hoax together, maybe they had the wherewithal to kind of just draw these other people in and collect a more fascinating story.
Yeah.
It just builds this mythology.
They were probably having a lot of fun seeing all the interest that they were getting from it.
Yeah, well, it's but at the end, you can roll your eyes and stuff at them doing that, but at the same time, one thing that I love about UFO stories are the interesting people that gravitate to them.
Mhm.
So although this case doesn't have the credibility that others do, it certainly has managed to get all these little interesting people and interesting little events all stuck together. It's lacking the mystery of what was it in the sky that day, that a UFO story should be based on. So it's almost like this, it's a different version of a story kind of set up as a UFO story, I guess.
Yeah,
In
and there were UFO cases besides this. I mean, I was just before coming on, I was just checking the database of the Canadian UFO Survey, and going back all to the beginning over 30 years, there's actually quite a few cases from Carleton, West Carleton, Carleton Place, Carp, Nepean. There's actually a number of interesting cases from there.
I don't know the area at all. Like I've never heard of Carp outside of this case. Um, in West
It's a
Carleton, I've never heard that place name until this documentary, because I've always known this case as the Guardian case or the Carp case, but this documentary, it seemed they favored West Carleton case.
Yeah, West Carleton is a broader area. Carp is a small town within this larger area.
Hmm.
Um, and it's just if you don't know the area, it won't mean anything. But there's Ottawa, and then just outside of Ottawa is a place called Canada,
Hmm.
and it's a nice bedroom community. A lot of people commute from there into the city. Lots of trees. There's a nice little forest, but it's also very close to the airport and the military base. As a matter of fact, and I'm trying to think what year that would have been, but I actually saw the space shuttle Enterprise. It was piggybacked onto a 747 and was touring around the world, as part of a public relations campaign, and it was stopped in Ottawa. And I got to see the actual space shuttle Enterprise on a 747, and it was parked just outside of Canada at the airbase, and you could actually walk right up to it. It was really kind of cool. But yeah, it's a very interesting little area.
Hmm. In talking before this, you sent me a few like photos of the envelope and stuff that you got from Guardian. How much other crap like this do you have archived? I can only imagine you live amongst the dustiest bookshelves of weird letters and envelopes. Have you always just been like meticulous with archiving this stuff?
I have actually.
Uh,
And I use it. I mean, I use a lot of this stuff as a resource for writing my books and articles and so forth.
that's what you tell people to justify the bookshelves full of dusty papers.
Yes, yeah. But of course, it's more than a bookshelves. I mean, there's filing cabinets and just everything you can name, tchotchkes galore, and of course, a lot. This is all going to the university archives, and COVID put a stop to the actual transferring of it, so it's sort of in between.
One thing that came up in this is when you showed me the envelope of the letter that Guardian sent you. You had told me when you watched the movie or the documentary UFO Town, when there's the gentleman is talking about his grandmother's documents, and you saw a resemblance.
Yeah, the size of the envelope is same. And what's interesting, and maybe you have to watch the documentary again, but it's sealed with this kind of packing tape, and it's
so
the same.
You're holding the letter Guardian sent, the envelope that Guardian sent you.
This is what the Guardian sent me. Huh. It's reversed, but this is what it is.
Yeah, but that tape is unique. I know that it's kind of a plasticky, shiny packing tape. It's not your typical tape.
It was on his grandmother's letter, right?
Ooh.
Which sort of to me says, Although I did notice that the envelope, mine is plain. The envelope that he opened had the Canada logo on it because she did work for External Affairs. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's interesting, though. Even with the tape being a match. But what did you? I know there's been suspects, quote unquote, of who Guardian was, but I've never heard any rumors of this fella's grandmother being Guardian. Is this a new character to you?
Well, there was Mrs. Gill
Mm-hmm.
and the Lebanex,
Mm-hmm.
and I forget which. I know it must have been the Lebanex who Tom Theophanous talked about quite a bit, and I'm not sure whether they were the ones who ran the war games out there or not. But there are a lot of people that could have been the Guardian, and in the documentary they just don't come out and say it was this person. And I think in either Tom's manifesto or the one by MUFON Canada or MUFON Ontario, that they do come out and say who they think it was.
Who is it that they say it was? That their opinion was?
I always thought that they were saying that it was the Lebanex, but I can't remember right now.
Okay. My thought was that whoever did this, whoever was Guardian and was behind it, or whichever person or people, they must have just been doing it for their own enjoyment, because it doesn't seem like anyone outside of Bob Exler tried to profit on it in any way.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, usually hoaxers, have some motive. And what was the motive behind this other than to just
get on TV?
Yeah, cause problems or, get people all riled up. Although the attention that the story was getting was certainly, very, they had a lot of fun by it, obviously.
Yeah. Well, at the time in the early 90s when this was on, or early 90s when this was on Unsolved Mysteries, that was about as big as you could get outside of like X-Files doing an episode.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. They must have had a couple of chuckles over that one.
Yeah, and also even just the way that the Unsolved Mysteries episode was put together, it was really like this Guardian person is this shadowy figure. Like if we could only talk to them, we could solve this mystery. Our aliens here, like it was a real ego boost for whoever Guardian was, and if that was their plan to just get publicity, man, they achieved that. And Bob Exler, like, when you watch UFO Town, I think it really shows kind of what his motivation was within it. But it's almost like I would want to think that he was involved in some way, because he seemed so keen to help promote it. But at the same time, maybe that was just because he was so closely attached to the case that by promoting Guardian in this case, he was in turn raising his own status.
Yeah, they didn't make a lot of money hand over fist. I mean, there's no question. And of course, because they were keeping their identity secret, they couldn't come out and say, "It's me, give me the money," right?
Yeah.
So how could you profit from this at all?
Well, Exler was planning, like he doing like looking for donations for a documentary that he wanted to film or a book he wanted to write about it.
Oh yeah, he was going to write the ultimate book on it. Yeah.
But this was, the Guardian case was happening, like, or these letters were coming out before he was involved. So I think it's safe to say that he wasn't responsible for it. But
yeah, he promoted it, but he wasn't responsible for it.
Yeah.
He may have given them ideas. He certainly knew who it was, I think. Absolutely.
Yeah, because he seemed to be pretty collaborative with it, with them. I've never seen, and just like we said earlier, I've never seen him in any of his promotion of this case address the bizarre manifesto. The manifesto that Guardian sent, just so I understand it, was that China was collaborating with Iraq spelt wrong and Canada to cover it up.
Yeah, some great interesting things in there. There's my copy here.
We're gonna get like kicked off YouTube for hate literature if we read too much of this, but maybe give us a gist of what Guardian has to say.
Yeah, I mean, there's a great. This is gonna be backwards. So I don't know why I'm doing this, but yeah, you can see there's the there's the Masons are involved.
Of course, they're involved. Yeah,
and there's all sorts of what's this? blue pulse beacons and things like that. But the manifesto, this is the type of thing. Global change is unavoidable. It can be one towards democracy if red China blacked out. Of course, you have to black out some of the stuff. And it's all about, there's, China's going to make war. There's biological weapons involved. Genome project is incomplete. Nazi-style medical experimentation. America will be crippled. Power grids, tanks, missiles, cars, antennas, phone lines, anything metal will pick up an EMP pulse. And, it's far right stuff.
Yeah. And I'm just thinking, like, whoever Guardian is, they probably don't wear a mask when they go to Walmart. Like, that's kind of who the type of character this is. They're not getting the vaccine.
Yeah, they're not getting the vaccine. That's true. Yeah, they're at the rallies that are around City Hall right now, at the Freedom rallies.
We had one in Halifax. My mom was telling me, my mom, who's like 60, had my grandmother in the car who's like 90. They were driving in the shopping area of Halifax, and there was like a group of like 12 people with signs about, don't wear a mask and don't get the vaccine. And my grandmother, I guess, yelled out the window something at them about, you guys should be wearing masks.
Get off my lawn.
Yeah.
Actually, we had one here too. And there was a woman just sitting in a lawn chair, and her sign read very simply, do not obey. And you're thinking, okay, in general, like what, you're just not going to stop at stop signs, or like, what's the deal here?
Yeah, that's quite the guidance to give out by a sign. But I think getting back to Guardian, I think what's great about this story, in my opinion anyway, is that someone, for whatever reason, and whoever this person was, just felt the need to stir things up in a creative way. And managed to, I think it's easy to say that this is one of the most infamous cases in Canada. It's well known for a lot of the wrong reasons, but it's still a cool UFO rabbit hole. If you write a book, well, I'm sure you've wrote a few of them, but if you write a book about Canadian UFO stories, there can be an interesting piece about the Guardian case without it being out of place.
Absolutely. Yeah, it has to be part of Canadian UFO lore, for sure. And whether it was the Gills or the Lavinx or somebody else, and there's I know there's a couple other names that are batted around too that might have been the people who were behind the Guardian. We still don't know exactly who the Guardian was, but there's educated guesses based on where these things were happening, and the fact that the burned out truck was found on somebody's property, and you can add up all sorts of stuff.
And I guess it's not even important really who it was, because like if that mystery gets solved, then the whole intrigue goes away. I think. It's like leaving it as an open book about who this person was or people were and what their motivation was. That would just keep people talking. I think if they had found them back in '92, this case would have been largely forgotten.
And Ian says that in the documentary, like, you don't even have to have the mystery solved. It's part of the UFO mystery and part of the phenomenon itself.
Can you think of any other case in Canada that, as far as the tabloidy nonsense goes, that holds a candle to Guardian? Like, has anything like this in your time here?
We have one that's pretty close, the Jackhead crash. And that's just 5 years ago, 6 years ago, something like that.
Where's this? Where's the Jackhead crash?
It's supposedly in Manitoba.
Okay.
And this was promoted by a lot of the schlocky UFO video groups and YouTube groups and that type of thing.
Oh, God love them. Yeah.
What are some of the big ones?
Fifth Phase of the Moon.
Fifth Phase of the Moon covered it, and a few others. And the story was, we don't have enough time to go into it. It's a long story, but the story was that something was said to have crashed on Lake Winnipeg not in northern Manitoba, but in central Manitoba. And it was immediately covered up. the government military flew in and they retrieved this this pyramidal shaped object that had fallen from the sky, and it had it under tarps, and they threatened people with imprisonment if they didn't shut up and all this sort of stuff. And it was all over Twitter. It was on Facebook. There were photos of military trucks, transport trucks, on some ice roads, and the photos are actually real.
Mm-hmm.
And there were photos of RCMP and RCAF snowmobiles on the ice on the lakes and that type of thing. And it took a life of its own. And I actually investigated that one and found out that there was nothing to it. But to this day, people say, "Oh no, I have a friend of a friend, or my sister's cousin said, yeah, this absolutely happened." But it was like everywhere, and websites were doing it. It made national TV. It was all over the place.
Nice. I say nice because I enjoy the charade of it, but I know this stuff drives you nuts. You if the color is weird on your video, but if your hair is gray, it's like it's these cases that have done it. Because I see you on one of my favorite parts of like the Facebook UFO groups is when you butt heads with what I would refer to, I guess, as an illogical believer. So
UFO zealot, a zealot.
A zealot, that's a good way to put it. But it's almost like you're so like logical and scientific in your approach. You've picked, I think, the worst area to apply that kind of behavior to, because there are a lot of lens flares floating around above us right now.
There are absolutely landing and taking off. Yeah. and lots of Starlink satellites. We just had another launch, and boy, we're just bracing for the UFO report.
Yeah, I get because people often will, whenever there's like a UFO thing in the news, or if there's like a tweet that's getting some attention that involves UFOs, people will tag me and send it. Like, Jordan, you see this? Once a week, it's the exact same photo of the Starlink satellites that somebody shares, where it's so obvious because it's like the 7 or 8 just dots in a row in the sky above some random city. And yeah, it just happens so often. Elon Musk must be getting a kick out of that.
And just think about it. Here's somebody who is really into, and they're convinced that some of the people who take the photos and submit them are, I know this was contact. This must be an alien ship. That they're on all sorts of websites, where there's all this sort of discussion. How is it that they had never heard of Starlink before? Tell me.
Yeah. Anyway, this has been great. When I first learned, like, I knew a bit about the Carp Guardian story, but I didn't know exactly how nuts it was until I watched UFO Town and then started reading afterwards. And I was so delighted to see your name pop up so much, because I'm just thinking like, this must have drove him nuts. So yeah. I was glad to get to see your envelopes, and I'm glad that you archive this stuff, because it's a lot of it's like what is on the internet now is really old transcriptions of old writings or super poor quality stuff. So I think you should do a new like blog post or something on your blog and include some of the new stuff, just because I'm sure a lot of people are going to be searching for this case now.
Yeah, I mean, I've mentioned it in my blog a couple of times, but not in a long post. Mm-hmm. So yeah, maybe I should. I've already been asked for a review of the show, so maybe I'll use that.
What is in a couple words? What is your review of the show overall? You've seen a lot of UFO documentaries. What did you think of UFO Town?
UFO Town is definitely one of the best documentaries about UFOs, because it's not strictly sensational. It tells a sensational story in a factual way. Mm-hmm. And it does uncover the fact that it seems to be a hoax, and it doesn't shy away from that. And I can't think of many UFO documentaries that actually do that.
Yeah.
That pursue the UFO stories and then say, oh yeah, well, it was a hoax. But they do it in a way that it's unraveling a mystery. And it actually is more suited to the most recent season of Unsolved Mysteries, where they really tell a story and a mystery and unravel it. And I know this is sort of your domain, telling good mysteries. But I think it does tell an interesting story about a mystery and the solution to the mystery in an entertaining way.
Yeah, and I thought they did, like, the same team did the Spaceman, the Granger Taylor piece. I thought that was well done as well. It was very good looking, and it was an intriguing story, and it kind of covered all the different angles. So I think they're on a bit of a roll. Yeah,
and Spaceman was very, very sad. It was very bittersweet. It really made you think about the impact of UFOs and the nature of ufology.
All right, Chris. Well, this has been awesome. I appreciate you staying up past your 9 p.m. bedtime and pulling out those dusty papers. But I'm sure we'll get to chat about this sort of thing again soon.
Yeah, stay tuned because the Canadian UFO survey is really close to being finished.
How close are we talking here? I've been on the edge of my seat because I know it's coming.
Let me just say, Jeff is coding as we speak.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm excited because I'm going to have you back as soon as it's released. I want to be first in line to go through it with you. But I appreciate this, Chris.
Okay, great. Thanks.
I want to thank you for joining Chris and I in our discussion about the Carp, Ontario, aka Guardian UFO Case. In case it wasn't clear during our discussion, I highly recommend anyone interested in this story make time to watch the documentary. I have the links that will get you to it in the show notes. And with that, I'm going to start wrapping up the episode. But first, some thanks. A massive thank you to Chris Rutkowski for joining us tonight. Also, a big thanks to Monty Datta for contributing the music to the episode. It's a piece called Noir Tokyo. And lastly, but most importantly, a massive thank you to everyone who listens to Nighttime, as without your interest and your support, this show would be as pointless as it would be impossible. But with that said, keeping the show alive is and has always been an uphill battle. So if you care to take a bit of weight off the show's back, please consider subscribing to the premium feed. For about the price of a cup of coffee, you can keep the show alive at patreon.com/nighttimepodcast. And with that said, let me thank the newest supporters of the show. The Dark Canuck, Melanie, sister to my favorite twin, Catherine, and Kayla. Thank you for your generous support. And for anyone else who'd like to help support the show but can't do it financially, you can give me a huge hand by simply sharing the episodes on social media and letting your friends know about what we're doing here. If anyone has any story ideas or want to give feedback on the show, you can find me at nighttimepodcast.com or on social media. I use Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and I'm on YouTube, but most Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Sunday nights at 9:15 Eastern Time. So until next time, take care of each other, hug your loved ones tight, and let me know if you see anything weird.
The Nighttime Podcast is written, hosted, and produced by Jordan Bonaparte. Copyright Jordan Bonaparte.